am delighted to welcome Marc Zell, Chairman of Republican Overseas International Affairs Analyst Dan Perry, and of course, editor of History Central, Mr. Marc Schulman. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining us tonight, because the files changed nothing to an extent. The more we know, the less we comprehend or understand, if you will, the Epstein saga, chapter 1 million. Let's take a look, and we take the debate from there.
The debate over releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files is exposing a growing divide inside the MAGA movement, turning a once unifying demand into a point of tension. For years, Release the List symbolized calls to hold elites accountable for their ties to Jeffrey Epstein and for what supporters saw as a justice system that protects the powerful. But as names and documents are unsealed, unity is giving way to disagreement. Some argue full transparency is essential, that exposure itself is accountability. Others warn that releasing names without charges or convictions risks trial by public opinion and undermines due process. The split reflects a deeper question: is disclosure without legal findings accountability, or a dangerous shortcut around due process? Has the Epstein case become a political weapon rather than a pursuit of justice for victims? Does transparency serve justice or replace it?
All right, gentlemen, flight logs and photos and powerful names, no smoking gun. Does transparency serve justice or replace it? As always, we begin with a quick fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we take it from there. Mr. Zell, please take the lead. Your 30 seconds are on.
Well, let me start with Jeremy Bentham, the famous political philosopher from the 19th century, who said that transparency is the one of the core values of a justice system. But he himself recognized that there are limits to this, and those limits, whether they're privacy or national security or the rights of victims who may be abused by excessive transparency, they have to be protected as well. And that is all reflected in the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which I'm holding here, just a couple pages, which attempts to reach that balance. And I think, frankly, my position in tonight's discussion will be that this is much ado about nothing.
All right, Dan Perry, your thoughts. 30 seconds are on.
The Epstein situation is a frustrating one to adjudicate because, of course, it is true that any name that appears in those documents risks being the victim of trial by public opinion. That's obvious, and it would be basically unfair. On the other hand, the dimensions of this scandal, the degree to which Epstein had insinuated himself in the American political elites, and the fact that he got away almost scot-free in his 2008 conviction is so damning and so bizarre and so potentially actually criminal for so many people involved, and was so terrible for the women victims that were caught up in all this, that I think in this case we have to bite the bullet and we have to go for transparency and then conclude that sunlight is the best disinfectant, despite the concerns about unfairness. I think we just have to make clear that appearing on this list is not a conviction. All
right, last but not least, Mr. Marc Schulman, your thoughts.
Two things. First, on some level, I agree with Marc Zell, and this is much ado about nothing. The whole process, the whole thing is a lot of discussion about something that ultimately may not be all that important. On the other hand, there is no transparency here. The administration completely ignored the law. What was released was a joke based on the law that was passed by Congress. This was a small percentage of the documents. The redactions, it said according to the law that was passed, that the Justice Department has to explain every redaction and why it redacted it. There was no explanations, no nothing. There is no transparency. There's a lot to be hidden here. For good reasons or bad reasons, this is being hidden. And I think it's not serving the interests of the administration. I think it's creating a boomerang effect and keeping this thing alive. If they would have brought everything out in one day, including whatever's there about Trump, Trump once said he could kill someone on Fifth Avenue and he'd get away with it. Bring it all out, it'll be over. The way they're doing it, they're making sure that it stays in the news and keeps on dripping, 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 and driving us all crazy.
Well, maybe that's the goal. Just suggesting. All right, gentlemen, now let's feel free to interact from this point onward. So I do want to circle back to you, Marc Schulman, because, you know, it's impossible to disconnect the following question from this specific case. But being on a plane or in a photo proves crimes, or are we conflating, you know, association with guilt?
Okay, we don't know anything about crimes. Crimes is something that the Justice Department, the FBI, those people are responsible for. You and I and the public are not supposed to decide whether that crime is being committed or not. What we can decide is whether people are hanging out with the people they shouldn't. You know, if we'd seen pictures of all of these same people around mafia bosses or around terrorists or anything else like that, we would say, this is terrible. Whether a crime was being committed is something else altogether. We know for a fact that that Epstein was a pedophile. We know for a fact he was marketing young women below the age and everything else we know terrible about him. And these people were hanging with this man. Now, should they have known? Did they know? We don't know for anything for sure. But we do know that every single person who appears in these pictures had poor judgment, exhibited extremely poor judgment. And of course, some of these people are still people who we're supposed to trust in politics and anything else. And anyone who exhibits such poor judgment, I don't think I should put much faith in their ability to run anything, whether it's a company or a government.
Mr. Zell, your thoughts?
Well, look, I think I began to be impressed by Marc Schulman's opening. He actually gave me a backhanded compliment, but to say that there was no transparency on whenever it was December 19th, when these files were just initially released, under this law that I'm holding in my hand, which passed with the president's support and bipartisan support of both parties in Congress by huge majorities, and that is what
it
is
said
happening.
All of it was supposed to be released. It didn't say part of it was supposed to be released, except those things that impinged upon people and cases. But this was not what happened. They decided to selectively release the documents. I'm sorry. I was wondering whether you were going to take the party line or not. I guess you are.
Listen, I'm in favor of releasing these files, Marc Schulman, but you are really off your rocker here. When this statute says that the Attorney General of the United States must withhold information that is, I have it here, identify information about personal medical files or a victim, or contains child pornography, or jeopardize an active federal investigation or ongoing prosecution, or is classified for reasons of national security. Those are all in the law. That's the obligation of the Attorney General. I'm not defending any kind of what's it called?
Cover-up?
Cover up. That's it. I'm not defending any kind of cover up here. I am calling into question the hypocrisy of Democrats like yourself, Mark, who are turning this issue into some kind of a national campaign, which is designed to basically take.
I have no real opinion upon this. I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less if these get released or not. I'm just humored by the fact that you're taking the party line like usual.
Interrupting me.
Would you expect anything else?
Your arguments. You're kidding, okay? But you said there was no transparency. That's a flagrant lie. What there has been is a restricted transparency with this thing. All this stuff came out. What is today? December 21st. Okay.
Yeah.
The documents came out, were released on the 19th. Give me a break. Now they're trying to go through these things. There are hundreds of thousands of these documents. They're going through them. They're trying to comply with the
Pam
dictates
Bondi had it on her desk a year ago. There wasn't enough time in a year to go through the documents?
No. A year ago, Mark, there wasn't a bipartisan wall-to-wall consensus to release these documents.
All right, Mark, let's allow the odd one, the Dan one, to chime in.
Yes, I feel so out of place. Guys, Mr. Zell, I mean, honestly, can you imagine what the Republicans, I should maybe say Republicans like yourself, would have made of this and are making of it? the moment that Bill Clinton is seen as somehow involved by association, of course it's all political. Of course it is. And the implications here are probably going to be more political than legal. Please, I listened patiently to you guys. All right.
Yeah.
The president only agreed
I'm
to this when
agreeing
it was
with you.
clear that it would pass the Congress. The president was dying to prevent it from being released. The last thing he wanted was transparency, because of all the people that could be damaged who are currently actively involved in running global affairs, he is number one. And his degree of association, already known of with Epstein, is astounding. And furthermore, there is little faith in this administration, Mr. Zell, and in Pam Bondi, and in the Attorney General. The idea that these are people who should be redacting names by the hundreds and by the thousands is met with some suspicion. And rightly so. How naive do you think people are? Indeed, they've had months and years to go over this. And now what we get is, of course, not no degree of transparency, because stuff was released, but a huge amount of redacting that is only going to compound and amplify the suspicion.
Mr. Perry, how long has Donald Trump been in office? Less than a year. Who was in office? Who was in office for the last 4 years beforehand? And what exactly was done to cause these files to be released at that time? Nothing. Okay, it is exactly as you said. This is a political theater. That's what this is. It's not about justice. It's really not about transparency either.
But
it's about
a
talking
political
points.
theater from the MAGA base. Those are the ones who are pushing it. The Democrats weren't pushing it. It's the MAGA base that wanted this.
Excuse me, Biden wasn't protecting the MAGA base in 4 years in office, or whatever who was running the government at that time. Okay, give me a break.
He had no interest. Trump and the Republicans have been forced into this because the MAGA base has some crazy conspiracies relating to this. This whole story is more about conspiracies and the fact that too many Americans believe in conspiracies than anything else.
This is the first time I've been on this show, and I thought the show was attempting to get at some kind of balanced view of the news. And what you guys are doing is just regurgitating, vomiting Democratic talking points.
No, we just trust you to do the heavy lifting, Mr. Zell.
I asked Mr. Perry
by the way, the same
his
could be said of you,
accusations that Donald Trump has got something to hide here. He has been very upfront about this, and he will continue to be upfront about this. And I will say that Republicans and Democrats and the majority of the public want this stuff to come out. Nobody's trying to hide it.
I have never read a Democratic talking point on the issue. There's only one of us in this group that actually belongs to the party.
Mr. Schulman, let's be honest about it. Democrats are staying quiet because they somewhat, understandably enjoy watching Republicans tear each other apart. But is it just smart politics, or they're protecting their own names in this saga?
It could be both. I mean, again, the reason this is coming out is because the MAGA base has been calling for this on and on and on. They believe some crazy conspiracies relating to this. It's part of the problem in America today, probably problem in much of the world, that too many people believe in conspiracy theories, thanks to social media and everything else. That's a whole other discussion. And they're the ones who are pushing for this.
And you think the MAGA base has a monopoly on conspiracy theories? I mean, get a brain.
I don't think they have a
I'm sorry. This is happening across the political spectrum. There are weirdos, fanatics. We've got our share. You certainly have your shares, and I could name a few right now, but I won't do it. Right now, the country needs leadership. It needs leadership in its domestic policies, economics, and crime, and immigration, and so on. Those things are being handled by this administration effectively, in my view. And in the foreign policy area, where we here in the Middle East know very well how effective the administration has been. The Epstein files are important. 84% or whatever it is of the public wants to see these things exposed. I think they should be exposed. I think everyone on the show wants to see them exposed, but they should be exposed in a proper manner, in accordance with the law that both parties passed by overwhelming majorities.
Dan Perry.
I have to revert to what I said before. There is a huge amount of distrust of the judgment of this administration, despite what I would agree has been its relative success in geopolitics in the Middle East in particular, but in many other places, it's been a resounding failure and an embarrassment to all the post-World War II history in a manner that is shocking. Much about this administration is highly problematic, and Pam Bondi is not trusted by the majority of the American people. And we all know the truth here, which is that conspiracy theories abound right now in a populist right. They exist everywhere, just like people everywhere lie, but it's a question of degree. And the populist right and the hard MAGA right are where conspiracy theories live primarily right now. And that is, as Marc Schulman said, the reason this is coming out. But the bigger story here, I have to tell you, is indeed Donald Trump. That's why it's so radioactive. I mean, you know Trump's history. I won't undignify the show by going over all the reasons people have to suspect that his association with Epstein was not just by association, but something perhaps more sinister. There are reasons. His past behavior gives us reasons to maybe be skeptical or suspicious a little bit. Of course, he's innocent until proven guilty.
Democratic pundit like the two of you are, that's exactly the kind of a vile
I don't know if you've read anything I've written,
that you're giving to the audience here tonight.
Oftentimes veer to the
you're
right
not doing you're not helping your case.
There is no case here. Mark, you're the person who's officially representing the Republican Party, talking Republican talking points.
With pride, I do that.
I mean, what the Democratic talking points? I really, Democrats like Dan said, the Democrats are just getting out of the way.
You've got nothing else in your party. Your party is disintegrating. You've got no candidates. You've got no policy. You've got a fragmenting, political establishment.
Mark, you got to let us get a word in also.
You need, okay, yeah, sure. So what would you
well, first of all, I'm not representing.
In order to distract the public from the real issues.
Let's use the short break maybe to recalibrate. And next time we see each other in a couple of minutes, every Mark will represent the other party, right? We'll switch and we'll see, maybe we can get to a mutual bottom line there.
I'm going last.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. So we all agree it's the Streisand effect times million. And Trump is naturally being very Trump about it. Let's take a listen.
So what they're trying to do with the Epstein hoax is get people to talk about that instead of speaking about the tremendous success like ending 7 wars. I ended 7 wars. Nobody's going to talk about because they're going to talk about the Epstein, whatever. I understand that we were subpoenaed to give files, and I understand we've given thousands of pages of files. And I know that no matter what you do, it's going to keep going. And I think it's enough, because I think we should talk about the greatness of our country and the success that we're having.
So, gentlemen, let's begin with another quick fire round here, because I believe that the American president is pinpointing a more profound problem humanity is facing. The more we know, the less we understand. We keep on confusing data with knowledge. Can the Epstein saga get to a bottom line? Marc Schulman, you take the lead. Your 30 seconds are on.
Okay. No, in the sense that I discussed this with my adult daughter. Well, both my daughters are adults, but we discussed this on Zoom today. And I said I was going on this program. So what's the difference? We know that all politicians are terrible. All of them do terrible things. And they're all going to be the same. So what difference does it make? We'll learn some more. Okay. I think that's very much the case. None of our politicians are saints. Most people who become politicians and succeed tend to be a little bit more aggressive, let's put it that way, because you can't become president without being a little bit aggressive. And that goes in many different areas. I'm not saying anything he did was right. But so what are we going to learn? Ultimately, let's assume that everything we think about this, that Trump did this and that, we know all those things. Let's give it as a given for the moment. Okay, so what? What does that prove? In some ways, I agree with President Trump. Let's move on to his great successes or failures, whichever they may be.
Mark Zell, I think that's a good point to pivot to you.
Well, look, I think the president put it exactly as in fact I did in the last segment, and I'm going to say it again. The country has many challenges, many successes. This president, in my view, and I'm being quite honest about how I feel, is probably the greatest president that we've seen in the United States in the last 100 years in terms of his effectiveness and getting things done. I'm not saying he's perfect. I don't agree with Marc Schulman that all politicians are terrible. I think there are some that are more terrible than others, and there's some that are really great. And this president has really broken the mold and has shown that a lot can be done with will and creativity and intelligence, and that's what's happening. And so I think this Epstein file thing is a distraction and not really a proper focus of the public attention.
Dan Perry, your thoughts?
Look, I think this diminishment of the Epstein scandal risks something unfair towards the victims of it, frankly. I'm a little bit surprised to hear both of you going that way. I will, however, agree, of course, that these are things that happened in the past, and shocking though they may be, the world has right now other very important topics, and perhaps it ends up being a distraction to the extent that we don't see actual convictions, but just all kinds of salacious guilt by association type stuff coming out of it. And I do think it's very, very unfortunate that people will conclude from this that all politicians are equally as bad and everyone's equally as corrupt and everyone cozied up to Epstein, because that conclusion, as Marc Zell says, would be false. There are degrees of guilt and degrees of mendacity, and it would be a shame for people to be that cynical about politics.
So,
Ellie, I'd like just to add one comment, just one comment about the victims. I agree with Dan Perry about this. The victims deserve justice, okay? And that justice needs to be served by the law enforcement authorities in the country, state and federal, focusing on their tribulations and their ordeals and bringing justice to them. Some of them have already committed suicide, as we know, and we can't ignore that. And I'm opposed, vehemently opposed to any attempt to push this under the rug. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the nation's attention needs to be focused on issues that affect the whole nation and its prosperity.
Well,
and its
gentlemen,
future.
if you keep on agreeing, we'll have to wrap it up, and I don't want to do that.
I can fix that in a second.
I would just disagree that
That was easy, too easy.
To bring justice to the victims will require keeping this in the news cycle for the next 2 years. Let's keep that in mind. Now, it's good or bad, that will be what happened. That's the realism. If we're going to bring
What
justice...
do we have in 2 years, Mark? An election, or basically 3 years, right? And that's what you all game. It's all gaming towards that, and you're entitled to do it.
No,
I think it's just. I think it's
gaming
There's an important election coming up in November.
Excuse me, I was not gaming.
We cannot
the
hear you when you
Crusaders
speak
for
together, and we
justice
do
when you're
want to
really
listen.
looking to win an election.
No, but I'm not gaming. I'm sorry,
election.
Mark. I'm not gaming anything. I made an observation here that you both said that we need to deal with the victims, which I agree with. I'm just making an observation that if we deal with all the victims and we bring everyone to justice, we will see this case being drawn out in the papers, online, everywhere for the next 2 or 3 years. Nothing to do with the elections. Just the fact of the matter is bringing cases in all sorts of jurisdictions is going to be complicated, difficult, and with a lot of publicity,
Mark.
and it's going to be a main item.
Circle back to the beginning of our conversation. That's transparency on its own is not enough.
Ellie, 1 second. You want some action? I'm going to give you action. For a guy that just accused the MAGA base of bringing up causing this whole thing, and you're saying, well, 2 to 3 years we're going to have cases going on. I mean, I'm really sorry. It's disingenuous. And you've got a problem. You got a party. We got elections. That's a democracy. That's how it works. You got to try to win. We will try to win. I'm in favor of the president. You want, I don't know, God knows who you want, but that's it. Okay, and we'll fight that out in November 26th and in November 28th.
Dan,
I would like to reply without speaking over anyone. Yeah, indeed. We will have elections in November that are going to be crucial to staying the hand of this administration that seems determined to burn down the House. And I would agree that we should not let the Epstein files, important though they are, get in the way of a discussion about the important issues at hand. And I would disagree vehemently with Mr. Zell that discussion would be helpful to the Republicans, because I don't think most Americans agree with the actions of this administration. And whereas I do not represent the Democratic Party in any way, shape, or form, and in my own writing and speaking, I sometimes agree with the conservative right. I do believe that the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party stands for bolstering and not undermining the transatlantic alliance. It stands for supporting Ukraine and not Putin. It stands for not undermining the global economy and global growth with a pointless tariff war often conducted on whim that is plainly illegal. It stands for not canceling the Department of Justice, FEMA, U.S. aid, which will cost millions of lives around the world, and eviscerate U.S. soft power. These actions of the administration are woefully unpopular and truly, in my view, disgraceful. And I am shocked, no less than shocked, and this doesn't happen every day, that a classic Republican, Mr. Zell, such as you, who does not come from the fevered MAGA base and probably knows that the house that is being burnt down is a house that brought peace and prosperity to much of the world. I'm shocked that you would go so far in justifying this president and even pretending, and this is perhaps the most risible, that what we have here is good faith and indeed intelligence. That's rich.
Boy, that's a very balanced statement coming from an AP editor with what did I read about you with Democratic liberal leanings? You know, I'm really sorry.
I believe it comes from a patriot and a liberal centrist.
The audience needs to know who you are, just like they know who I am.
You're the only person who's clearly
not being
identified,
honest
Mark.
with the public about your views. And when you start talking like that, I'm looking at the CNN, for God's sakes, with their public opinion polls show that the public support for this president is very deep. Okay,
but they have problems with
him.
39 to 42%. That's deep.
Mr. Zell, do you favor undermining
on
NATO?
the economy, on immigration, on energy, on lower gas prices
and the transatlantic alliance?
They love it. The public doesn't give a good god
Mark,
darn about the
I'm really disappointed in you, who did not support Trump to be renominated, because you knew what damage he would do to Ukraine. You knew what damage he would do to the transatlantic alliance. Yes, he's been very good for Israel for the moment. I'm not sure how that'll continue, but he's been very good for Israel without a doubt. But you are following the line.
You know,
I was sure you would do it. I was disappointed, though. I thought you'd be objective a little bit, but you're not.
Gentlemen, we have trigger words on that program, and the transatlantic is one of them.
Show.
Yeah, exactly. This is where we draw the red line.
Call me back for that one.
Marc Zell, Marc Schulman, Dan Perry, thank you very much for your time, for your insights, and for this passionate...
Did you have enough action tonight?
Well... Round two in the making. Thank you very much for this pre-gaming.
Right.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for this